Hey guys, so this is part 3 of the video with or disassembly portion of the project, which is basically removing the exhaust system, which is comprised of 3 things: the exhaust itself, the catalytic converter, and then the headers that attach to the engine. So I'm going to start with the exhaust first, and then work our way towards the engine. I think that's the way that makes the most sense, especially if you're doing an OEM exhaust, because as of right now I have through bolts, but in reality for the exhaust system, the OEM exhaust system, they're actually like pressed in studs on the catalytic converter. So I think you really do have to start with the exhaust, take that off, then you can take the catalytic converter off, and then work on your manifold at the end. So yeah, I guess I kind of mentioned in one of the other videos I did titanium bolts, and it is true, came apart very easily, so I'm going to do that now. Yeah, so I have a size 14mm socket and nut setup. So as I mentioned, I had already broken all this apart, so it's going to come apart very easily, but it wasn't hard at all. As you tell, there's like no rust or anything, so it worked out great. So as you can see, sometimes it's very hard, so you gotta like switch what side you're attaching into. You may even need to use 2 open ends instead of a socket and an open end, just because the curvature of the exhaust and stuff might be too hard to get to. Swivel could help sometimes to get to these weird spots. Alright, so the exhaust is pretty much disconnected from the catalytic converters. Another point, if you're doing it off an OEM one, that is all steel, so you're gonna probably have to throw some PV blaster onto those nuts the day before just to loosen them up, because they do rust up. I gotta do the undo the hangers. So for my exhaust, because it's so light and one of the hangers was causing it to slightly crooked, I only have 3 of the hangers attached to it. They kind of really stink to get apart, to be honest. You gotta wiggle them and move them around and push while you're wiggling, and some of them are really tough to get off. So hopefully this is not too bad. This is the part where it might be helpful to have second body, but I think what I'll do is I'll shift my body position so my knee's supporting this while I work the other side. Success! The exhaust off. So as you guys can see, the exhaust is gone. I'm gonna basically put the hardware that I took off back on this, just for safekeeping, and then I'll work on removing the catalytic converter itself. As you notice, there's no gaskets. Like I mentioned before, this has all been taken apart before. So I'm just kind of showing you how I'm doing it, or how I did it. Alright, so on to removing this catalytic converter. Actually, it might be better this way, yeah. Alright, that catalytic converter is off. And I will repeat for doing this one here. Sometimes it just doesn't work, and you really have to just try different ways. So I'm going to need another 14mm wrench for those two. Alright, so number 2's off. Alright, so next up, I'm going to focus on doing the front headers, and that'll basically cause me to have to shift that way, further down under the car. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to loosen we're going to take the 4 bolts for the water pump off. That gives us better access to get to the hardware for the exhaust manifold, or you would have the exhaust manifold, this would be the headers. And then from there we could take the O2 sensor off. Disconnecting that's a pain, especially from that connector all the way up there. And we'll take this this engine mount off as well once the header's off, where we have better access to the bolts and stuff. So let's start with the water pump, and then we'll work on this, and then this. You don't really need to take that. You just need to be able to access the bolt back here. All right. So next, I'm gonna take. So next up, I think what we'll do is we'll try to disconnect this. So I already have it unhooked. It's a pain in the butt. You basically gotta unhook it from the engine. There's a little clip in the back here that you gotta like push down, and then slide this up away from the engine from above, and then you can disconnect the two connectors that are holding it together. I don't want to do it again. It sucks. So I'll let you guys figure that one out on your own. So next up is basically there's these two little push clips that the cable's secured to. You just push those up to release them. I'm gonna need two hands to do it though, so I'm gonna put the camera down. You're not gonna really see it. Now, the nice thing is the O2 sensor is a 22 mil like nut, and that's the same size nut you need to take the side scoops off. So if you have the tool for that, you should have the tool to take the O2 sensor off. Actually, all right, O2 sensors off, and basically the last thing to get the exhaust manifold or the headers off is you take these 7 nuts off these studs, and it should just drop away from the engine, and the gasket obviously will drop away too with it. So let me go get the tool for that. The thing with doing this, which kind of stinks, is it's obviously hard to get to certain spots. So I kind of try to use different combinations of swivels, extensions, and deep socket to like get to what I need. I've already loosened these. I think to loosen them the first time, you might need like a longer, more comfortable position to loosen it. So you might need like longer extension setup, so the tool's down here versus your arm is in here in this very tight quarter. I've got it to the point where I can now just throw a small, extension like this, or just directly on the swivel, and I can just loosen it that way. So you just got to kind of play with it in regards to using like I'm using a 1/4 inch drive with a 12 millimeter deep socket. You might be able to use a 3/8, but the bigger you get, the tighter the space constraint is because your tool is bigger. So you just got to keep that in mind. Something like this to get to the lower sockets, the lower nuts that are in between the pipes. Just to show you how tight it is, like there's really not much space, and you're trying to get a nut you can't even see, it's right there. Alright, I'll continue on. So as you can see, the exhaust is loose. The only thing now is I need to undo there's the hanger that it's attached to right here. So I gotta undo that, and then I could drop the exhaust out. Alright, so I got the front header off. I'm gonna go put this away, and then we'll work on the back one. Actually, no, then we'll focus on the engine mount, front engine mount first, and then do the back one. So just for the sake of, keeping track of how I'm going to throw all the nuts on real quick, and then we'll move on to doing the engine mount removal. Also, take the old gasket off. Yeah, the engine mounts are 14 mils, so basically with this setup you can get to all the bolts for the front engine mount, and you can take that off. And the engine mounts off. Alright, and we're done with this side. And now I'm going to move to the rear bank. I'll start by taking that bolt for the engine mount off first. So the first thing you want to do is take this guy off. The reason why is because we may have to tilt the engine up to get enough clearance to let this come out. So you see how the engine rocks now that you've got the front and the rear bolts, engine mount bolts off. That now gives you enough space to push the engine up to get this manifold away from the studs. I'm just trying to get a better angle for you guys. So this is the O2 sensors connector. So basically you gotta squeeze this bottom piece up, pull it down, and now you have it disconnected enough that you can pull it apart. You have to kind of do that on both sides, but you need two hands, so I'm just gonna now disconnect it. Alright, now the O2 sensor can be removed. Alright, O2 sensors off. And then we repeat again, removing all the 12 millimeter nuts that are currently securing the engine, the headers to the engine. This one's a little tougher because, as you can see, a lot of them are blocked by the pipe, so you got to get creative with the way you get to them. I'm gonna try to set this up here so maybe you can see what I'm doing. Hopefully this works. So we're basically taking these two remaining bolts out. There's really no good way of doing this. To show you, it's just a lot of hard to reach areas. The problem is we have to basically tilt the engine up to get this off, because there's really not a lot of clearance between this and the engine, this beam and this engine. So I'm gonna see if I could push it up. Yeah, I might need my jack to push this up to give me enough clearance to pull that out. So I'm gonna have to reconfigure again. So that appears to me to be enough to get it off. Yeah, there you go. Alright, I'm gonna release this so it goes back down. Alright, and I got the last gasket off, and at that point it's complete. The exhaust system is completely off the car. As you can see, headers are off, O2 sensor is gone. It's wide open for, I guess, the turbo manifold to get installed later on in the project. Alright, hopefully I captured most of what you needed to know, and there's some decent footage in here. Alright.